This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Michelle Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. Fatalities at Hong Kong airport. A cargo plane skids off the runway, pushing a patrol car and itself into the sea, killing 2 security staff. Tokyo's ruling LDP and Japan Innovation Party signs a coalition deal, setting the stage for Sanae Takaichi to become the country's first female prime minister. The South Korean authorities seek to formally arrest most of the 64 nationals flown home from Cambodia over suspected links to a major cyber scam network. China's economic growth slows to a one-year low, raising questions on whether Beijing can adjust policies to conjure a rebound in domestic spending. Also, all eyes are on the Chinese capital as leaders of the world's second-largest economy begin closed-door meetings to map out China's goals for the next 5 years. Ahead on the bulletin, newly elected leader of Taiwan's opposition Kuomintang, Cheng Li-wen, pledges to bring unity to the party. But will the path to resolving factional divisions be as straightforward as she hopes?
I can only surmise that through these years, decades of negotiations, I don't think that they will just throw it out of the window and do whatever they want to do.
CNA's Lokway Su speaks with the Philippines Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Theresa Lazaro, on ASEAN's negotiations with China on a long-sought code of conduct for the disputed South China Sea. A rare fatal aviation incident this morning shook Hong Kong after a cargo plane veered off the runway during landing and collided with a ground patrol vehicle, killing 2 security workers inside. All 4 crew members on board the aircraft were unharmed. The fuselage of the Boeing 747 aircraft, operated by Turkish carrier ACT Airlines for Emirates, broke in half after it crashed through the airport fence. Police have yet to rule out launching a criminal probe as investigations continue. Airport officials say the patrol car was not on the runway when it was pushed into the water.
呢個嘅巡邏車，佢係負責巡邏我哋成個北海岸線超過4公里，係確保成個機場嘅安全，有事故係即時處理嘅。佢呢度係過去1998年。 我哋嘅海岸線係都有巡邏車安排，亦都有站崗，佢哋不時喺度巡邏。
According to Flight Radar, the Emirates flight EK9788 from Dubai touched down at a speed of about 130 kilometers per hour. A kilometer on, the 32-year-old plane veered out of the runway at 90 kilometers per hour before impacting the water at about half that speed. Airport officials say there was no distress signal, with weather and runway conditions also described as normal at the time of the incident. Well, rescuers earlier recovered the 2 security workers trapped in the car after a 40-minute search. One was declared dead at the scene. The other died after being rushed to the hospital. Now, Hong Kong operates the world's busiest cargo airport. Authorities say the north runway will reopen after safety inspections have been completed. Flights have not been affected. The latest incident is the second to occur at the city's airport. It follows a similar case in 1999 when a China Airlines flight crash-landed during a typhoon, killing 3 people. Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party has formed a coalition government with a new partner, Japan Innovation Party, a day before Parliament votes to elect a new prime minister. With this backing, it is almost certain that LDP leader Sanae Takaichi will become the country's first female premier. Hirofumi Yoshimura, co-head of the right-leaning Japan Innovation Party, known as Ishin, met with Ms. Takaichi over the past hour, where they formally signed a coalition agreement. The LDP and the Ishin together hold 231 of the 465 seats in the lower house of parliament. That still falls 2 seats short of a majority. But it does ensure that Ms. Takaichi will likely win the vote in parliament tomorrow. The LDP leader's path to victory was all but certain until the junior coalition partner, Komeito, ended its 26-year-old partnership with the LDP, complicating the process. However, for Ms. Takaichi to govern, she will still need to court the support of other opposition groups, including for an upcoming supplementary budget. Meantime, the market's showing signs of optimism after the reports of the coalition deal. The main index in Tokyo, the Nikkei 225, jumped 3.37% to close at a fresh record high of 49,185.5. The Topix added 2.46% to end the trading day at 3,248.45. And Japanese yen trading at about 150 to the US dollar. China's ruling Communist Party has started one of its most important closed-door meetings today to finalize its development blueprint for the country for the next 5 years. President Xi Jinping, at the start of the meeting, delivered a work report and commented on proposals for the country's 15th five-year plan on economic and social development. CNA's senior correspondent Han Yu-guan looks at what was achieved in a five-year plan that just ended and what to expect in the next.
Sincere, selfless, and brother-like. This was how China described the assistance from the Soviet Union. Two countries joined by their belief in the communist ideal. This building behind me reflected that bond. Back in its early days, it was called the Sino-Soviet Friendship Building. It was a period of time where the newly minted People's Republic was importing a lot of Soviet ideas about a command economy. One of them was the five-year plan. The first Chinese iteration of it was released in 1953, about 4 years after the Communist Party assumed control of China. Back then, it was all about rigid quotas. But today, it's less about how much coal or steel to produce, more about setting the broad priorities for the economy.
So in short, the five-year plan for the Chinese government is from top level to give concrete KPI, to every single department and execute for the next 5 years.
I would argue it's quite a sophisticated process, and there's a table of a lot of indicators, the targets that the central government wants to meet, and the local government will look at it and see these are the targets that I can do the same thing as the central government, and these are the things I might have different resources, I might do something different.
Specific economic growth targets were central to those plans. But in 2021, in an unprecedented move, the 14th plan was rolled out without one.
The 14th five-year plan was not really confident to make a target. The plan was released during the pandemic, and there was a question like exactly how much China could achieve in those years, but China's economy grew by 5.4% in the past 5 years, which is really remarkable.
女士们、先生们，大家下午好。
The government has been taking stock of the plan. It's been holding press conferences reporting on some of the achievements of the last 5 years.
At the same time, when we look at urbanization, the target was to make China's urbanization rate 65 by 2025, but currently we're looking at almost 68, so that's beyond the target. And when we look at innovation, China says it wants to keep its R&D as a percentage of GDP 2.5%. We're now looking at 2.68.
One of the bright spots is the semiconductor industry, for sure. For instance, the mass production of 7-nanometer chips by SMIC, which is definitely a milestone development. And then China has its first ever made in China homegrown passenger jet, the COMAC C919. BYD right now is leading the world both in terms of production and sales, right? And as far as the digital infrastructure is concerned, China has built the largest 5G network in the world.
I think the China electric vehicle, in terms of popularity, is already into the tier one space. If you ask me 5 to 10 years ago, it's out of my imagination. The second is AI. I think the DeepSeek moment, to be honest, really, changed a lot of, investor sentiment.
However, some key goals fell short.
One of the areas that has fallen short is the goal of significantly boosting consumption demand, and that is due to a combination of reasons. For instance, the property market slowdown, and then there is the economic uncertainties in the post-COVID years. And today, there is a trade tension between the U.S. and China.
With the 14th five-year plan set to expire, work has already started on the next plan as early as July 2024, when the Communist Party of China held its third plenum.
Think about a corporation, maybe. The third plenum is more like a board meeting. It shows the direction, it determines the direction of the company, and it determines the priority of the company.
I think the most important one is about technology self-sufficient, if you like. In particular, in the hardware self-sufficient. So we are talking about chips, we are talking about robotics, we are talking about machine, the whole supply chain. I think that is the most important target for the 15th five-year plan, if you like. And then the second most important is targeting domestic consumption. You are seeing the Chinese government is trying to reduce the competition, the so-called anti-involution, that there will be a more healthy competition in which it's not just compete on price, but it's also compete on quality, and also utility. And also one of the target, which I think is also very important, in particular in this juncture, is global cooperation. So one of the 15 five-year plan is to consolidate or to cultivate an ecosystem that is global friendly and also can help the Chinese companies to do business with the other countries.
The 15th five-year plan will steer China till 2030 towards the party's objective of achieving the per capita GDP of a moderately developed country by 2035. But its impact will be felt beyond the country's 1.4 billion people. Its choices on growth, green energy and technology will ripple through supply chains and markets across the world. Tan Yu-Guan, CNA, Shanghai.
Well, China, according to state media Xinhua, has removed its top trade negotiator, Li Chenggang, from his post as Beijing's permanent representative at the World Trade Organization. Li Yongjie has been named as the country's new representative. The decision is part of a list of ambassadorial appointments and dismissals by President Xi Jinping. While no reasons were given, a Hong Kong newspaper in July reported about impending changes amid heightened trade tensions between China and the U.S. The 58-year-old has long represented Beijing in multilateral trade discussions. And Mr. Li has played a key role in 4 rounds of U.S.-China trade talks, with both sides seeking to avoid a bruising trade war. It also comes just months after his appointment as the country's lead international negotiator. Now, it seems like Mr. Li has also ruffled feathers in America. He was recently singled out by the U.S. Treasury Secretary over remarks that Scott Bessent described as, quote, slightly unhinged. The U.S. Treasury chief said Mr. Li had threatened in August that China would unleash chaos on the global system should America impose port entry fees on Chinese ships. And both sides have rolled out tit-for-tat port fees since last week. Despite the trade pressures, a meeting between leaders Xi Jinping and Donald Trump still expected later this month on the sidelines of the APEC summit in South Korea. A break's up next, but coming up on East Asia tonight, China's GDP growing at its slowest pace in a year. That's with trade headwinds from U.S. tariffs weighing on the economy, but it's not the only factor. We'll take a look at what's going on domestically as well. After Asahi, Japan is gripped by a second cyber attack, this time affecting the popular brand Muji's delivery partner. Details next.
In the world of trade, it helps to be part of the network.
Well, not just any network. UOB's network.
Most extensive network in ASEAN.
Through this network, you can connect directly to my business.
And mine.
And mine.
And mine!
With this network, you can source for supplies big
and small across supply chains.
And connect to sector specialists through 500 UOB offices globally.
With access to an end-to-end platform that syncs up your entire value chain.
For a complete view of your trade and cash position across borders on one single interface.
And that's what makes UOB the one bank for ASEAN.
It's where the region's most extensive trade network meets a truly integrated supply chain platform. And there's just one more thing to say. Be part of ASEAN's most extensive trade network.
Spotted 2 fast-moving vessels outside of Singapore borders.
Continue monitoring.
Singapore Police Coast Guard, we are the first responders for maritime threats.
The sea lanes around Pedra Branca is very busy. We are here to ensure the safety of international shipping.
I want to see what's inside the boxes. What's that salt?
One subject seen last walking along the pipeline near to the breakwater. The subject was found to be a person of interest.
Sir, there is 2 PIW in the water. Looks like they are holding onto a plank.
These are the top 5 Singaporean traits according to the survey.
Yo, this is actually sad. Why is this our trace?
That's how Singapore was shaped since independence. We as a small country, we really have to be great at almost everything we do in order to survive.
CNA has consistently received global recognition for its news coverage, current affairs programs and documentaries. In the last decade, CNA has won over 600 international awards for excellence in journalism. This year alone, CNA has already won more than 50 awards recognising our trusted news coverage and engaging documentaries. CNA, understand Asia.
Hello again. You're watching East Asia Tonight, and we've got business news now with Roland Lim. So, Roland, I believe China has actually got a major report card out today, and they're saying that they're moving closer to its annual growth target of about 5% growth. Tell us more.
Right, Otella. Yes, the headline numbers did meet market expectations, but there's some weakness, and it's prompting calls for policy support from some quarters. China's economy continues to lose steam amid lackluster consumer spending and strong external headwinds. Third quarter GDP expanded 4.8% on year in the third quarter, beating estimates, but it's the weakest growth in a year, which brings China's full year expansion to below the official target of around 5%. Breaking it down, China's factory production improved moderately in the month of September from the previous month amid a recent pickup in exports. But on the flip side, consumer spending have softened as subsidy support wanes and the property slump deepens. Fixed asset investments also showed its first contraction since 2020. And China's home prices fell more steeply last month, despite many major cities rolling out more easing measures to revive the struggling sector. New home prices fell 0.4% on month in September, and that's the fastest pace in 11 months. The prolonged price slump is deterring home buyers from investing in the property markets. Beijing has rolled out only modest support so far, trying to hold firepower in case of future shocks. But rising trade friction with the US may further cloud the outlook. All this sets the stage for a crucial political gathering this week. Chinese President Xi Jinping and other ruling Communist Party elites will be gathering in Beijing to map out their goals for the next 5 years, which could offer clues on how Beijing aims to stabilize its economy. Staying with the Chinese economy, Beijing kept its benchmark lending rates unchanged for a fifth consecutive month as policymakers continue to evaluate the impact of recent flare-up of trade tensions with the US. Now, the one-year loan prime rate stands at 3%, and the 5-year LPR stands at 3.5%. The rates are calculated each month after 20 designated commercial banks propose rates to the People's Bank of China, or PBOC. Now, the LPR usually tracks China's 7-day repo rate set by the PBOC. That main policy rate was left unchanged this month. But with the resumption of U.S. Fed rate cuts and persistent domestic deflationary pressure, where analysts now see more room for the central bank to trim rates again this year. With all that, let's take a look at how Chinese markets performed today. Well, Chinese stocks rebounding after the sell-off last week, and the Hang Seng Index surging 2.4% thanks to tech shares like NetEase and Alibaba. Shanghai Composite closing out the day 0.63% higher. Shenzhen did better, nearly 1% in the green. Let's check in on the Chinese currency as well. After the country's central bank set its prime lending rate for this month, the yuan is relatively unchanged, 7.122 to the dollar. Tensions are rising between China and the Netherlands over control of chipmaker Nexperia. The country's Chinese division has told its employees that they can ignore any orders coming from its headquarters in the Netherlands. The move comes after the Dutch government seized control of the Chinese-owned firm on security grounds and U.S. pressure, with a demand that they remove Nexperia's Chinese CEO or risk facing sanctions. In response, Beijing blocked Nexperia from exporting chips from China and called on the Netherlands to correct its wrongdoing. Now, the Dutch economy minister says the intervention was necessary to prevent Europe from becoming fully dependent on foreign powers for its key chip technology. The standoff underscores deepening global divisions over semiconductor control, with Europe caught between U.S. pressure and China's growing tech ambitions. Well, so much news coming out of China. CNA's senior correspondent Tan Yu-Guan in Shanghai explains the difficulty in gauging the impact of U.S. tariffs on the Chinese economy.
Well, it's hard to tell because there are no official figures isolating the impact of the U.S.-China trade friction. The National Bureau of Statistics did not break that out. But what we do know is that in the third quarter, China's economy expanded 4.8% year-on-year, which matched analysts' expectations. So while trade tension is clearly a drag, the official numbers did show that in the first 3 quarters of the year, exports are still up 7.1% and imports are down 0.2%. On the long-term front, China is still on track to its declared goal of doubling its 2020 GDP by 2035. Based on growth modeling, to hit that target, China needs an average real growth of around 4.5 to 5% per year over the period. Now, at 4.8% in the third quarter and net exports still contributing, the target remains within reach. But slower consumption numbers and external pressures means there's much less margin for error.
Japanese retailer Muji has stopped its domestic online shopping service after a ransomware attack on its delivery partner Asukuru. The company that owns Muji, Ryohin Keikaku, says its own system has not been compromised and its store logistics and deliveries are unaffected. But it did not say when it can resume online sales. Asukuru is a major Japanese mail order and e-commerce company. It's investigating if any personal information or customer data was leaked. Now, Asukuru didn't say who carried out Sunday's attack or what their demands were. Shares of Asukuru shedding more than 5% today. Ryohin Keikaku fell more than 6% at one point, but closed 2.5% lower. The incident comes just weeks after Japan's biggest brewer Asahi Group was hit by ransomware, disrupting production and shipments of its super dry beer. The attack was claimed by hacker group Killen. The latest disruption raising questions about Japan's e-commerce infrastructure, especially when many retailers share the same online vendors. Now, in the forex market, currencies in Asia-Pacific trading mixed against the greenback as traders await the U.S. inflation report out later this week. The Japanese yen is relatively weaker against the greenback, 150.80 changing hands with $1. This as investors await tomorrow's vote on the country's next prime minister, with LDP leader Sanae Takaichi appearing to be on track to become Japan's first female prime minister. The vote results expected to give clarity on policy direction. Gold and silver also edging higher after Friday's sell-off, helped by chances of further U.S. interest rate cuts. Gold currently trading at $4,252.88 per ounce, silver at $51.84. A weakness in the US dollar this year and the wider use of China's yuan has sparked talks of de-dollarization. Earlier, I spoke with Eric Robertson, Global Head of Research and Chief Strategist at Standard Chartered Bank, and he says that the de-dollarization is an overstatement.
We certainly think that RMB usage will increase. And certainly we are seeing increased examples of what I would call bilateral trade agreements that use RMB more extensively. What I think we have to be careful of, though, is not to extrapolate too far and to start having discussions about potentially RMB replacing the dollar as a medium of trade. The way we prefer to describe it is that the two currencies, from the purposes of trade, will operate in parallel ecosystem. Has there been a significant increase in FX hedging activity, which has put downward pressure on the dollar? Yes. Has the dollar sold off on increased expectations for FOMC rate cuts? Absolutely. Corporates, for example, if you look at exporters out of Asia, are still holding a record amount of U.S. dollars as a function of their dollar receivables. They're not hedging them. They're not converting them back to local currency. And so the evidence there is quite strongly opposed to de-dollarization. The one that gets everybody interested is what the public sector or reserve managers are doing. And yes, they continue to diversify out of dollars, but that trend has been in place for 10 years, and that hasn't necessarily been a strong indicator of de-dollarization, more a function of diversification.
And you're up to date with the business news. Otelli.
Thanks so very much for that, Roland. Well, we're going to go for another break now, but coming up on East Asia tonight, Hong Kong on the alert as it's bracing for strong winds from tropical storm Fengshan. The tropical storm killed at least 8 people after sweeping through the Philippines. And how a dark horse winner of Taiwan opposition Kuomintang's leadership race is reigniting hope among the party's supporters. This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. A rare fatal aviation incident in Hong Kong. A landing cargo plane veered off the runway, pushing a patrol vehicle into the sea, killing 2 inside as the aircraft splits as it plunges into the water. All 4 crew members on board the plane were unharmed. Japan's ruling LDP agrees to form a coalition government with new partner Ishin, making it all but certain that Sanae Takaichi will become the country's first female prime minister in a vote of lawmakers tomorrow. South Korean police issue arrest warrants for most of its nationals repatriated from Cambodia for their suspected links to voice phishing, romance scams, and other online fraud. A former Kuomintang lawmaker, Zheng Liwen, already has work cut out for her when she assumes the position of party leader on November 1st. Ms. Zheng, who will be the second woman to take over the reins of the 130-year-old party, was seen as the dark horse in a KMT leadership race over the weekend, where she narrowly beat ex-Taipei mayor Hao Long-bin with just more than 50% of votes. Chinese President Xi Jinping on Sunday congratulated Ms. Zheng on her win, adding that he hopes the KMT and the Chinese Communist Party could work together to, quote, advance national reunification. Now, Ms. Zheng entered politics with the DPP back in 2002, but quit and joined the KMT in 2005. She has since been a critic of the DPP, and during a news conference after her win, called on the party to, quote, stop playing the anti-China card. Now, she's also a vocal supporter of the 1992 consensus, which was a verbal agreement between the Chinese Communist Party and the then ruling KMT. The agreement gave each side room for interpretation on what one China actually meant. Now, to help us understand more on what Ms. Zheng's election as KMT chair means for the island's politics and its relations with China, we are joined by CNA's senior correspondent Victoria Jan live from Taipei. So, Vic, first up, tell us, why is Zheng Liwen's victory generating so much buzz?
It's mainly because Zheng Liwen breaks the mold of a traditional KMT leader. She's not an insider. In fact, she started her political career in the Democratic Progressive Party, so her win came as a big surprise. Now, compared to Hao Long-bin, who has deep roots and long connections in the KMT, Zheng represents something very different, more of an outsider shaking up the old order. She's also one of the few women to ever reach this level in Taiwanese politics, and that alone has attracted attention. She's outspoken, confident, and sharp in debates, qualities that make her stand out in a party known for its older and more conservative image, according to analysts.
他的风格本来就是一个比较行动派，然后比较你说激进派也好，或者是比较一个走现代的这种网络时代的语言跟风格哦。那而且讲白了，他毕竟是传统，他毕竟是民进党出身的，所以可能在媒体的运用啦，在语言的这种所谓的鼓动上面啊，哦，那或者是行动的能力上面，可能都比这种国民党传统100年包袱的运作更有执行力。
And what really made the difference was her campaign strategy. Zheng didn't have backing from the KMT establishment or big political families, but she made smart use of social media, live streams, short clips, and direct engagement with members online. And that helped her connect with younger voters and grassroots members who want change. So in many ways, her victory shows that the KMT's base is hungry for a fresh voice, someone who can fight back against the DPP, but also modernize the way that the party communicates.
Well, Vic, all eyes are going to be on Zheng Liwen when she takes over the job from November 1st. So what could be some of her first tests?
Well, her first test comes almost immediately on November 1st, when she officially takes office. She'll have to work with lawmakers from the KMT and the Taiwan People's Party, who together control the legislature. How she manages that relationship will show what kind of leader she plans to be, a negotiator or a hardliner. Then there's the 2026 local elections, which will be her first real performance test. Can she turn her energy and visibility into wins at the local level? And looking further ahead, the 2028 presidential race will be the ultimate challenge, whether she can help the KMT rebuild enough support to compete with the DPP again. And another big test will be cross-strait relations. Chen has made it clear that she supports dialogue with Beijing under the 1992 consensus. But some analysts say that her strong pro-China image could become a problem. She will need to prove that she can engage China without straying too far from mainstream public opinion, which wants peace, but also wants to protect Taiwan's autonomy. So overall, her success will depend on whether she can unite the party, handle legislative politics, and manage cross-strait ties. Now, all while showing that she's not just a symbol of change, but a leader who can deliver it.
That's right. 55-year-old Cambridge graduate will have quite a fair bit to prove. Thanks so very much for that report. CNA's senior correspondent Victoria Jen, live from Taipei. Now, 23 ASEAN and China signed off on a declaration on how to manage dispute in the South China Sea, but still no agreement even on the framework. As the bloc looks ahead to next week's summit, CNA's Lok Wei-Su spoke to the foreign secretary of one of the principal claimants, the Philippines, Maria Theresa Lazaro, keeping the faith on the breakthrough in the Code of Conduct.
There had been a lot of very substantive discussions. The milestones are slowly being discussed carefully, but yet we still have to give our best shot and try to have this Code of Conduct be a product of the work, the hard work of so many ASEAN member states negotiations.
The basis of discussion. So, for example, you yourself have made it very clear that what you are concerned about is the legality of any code of conduct. Will it be legally binding?
It is our position.
Where does it apply? The zone of applicability, so the geographic scope of the code of conduct. Even on these very basic points, there is no agreement from the principal party, that's of course China.
That's very
true. What is the point of discussion if the initial points, the premise of the discussion, and you in your legal training, you would be aware of that? There's no agreement on that.
Yes, there's no agreement as of this time. It's, as I said, it's evolving. There is an evolving discussions on many things. Many ASEAN member states, they have their own positions, but during the discussions, there seem to be some kind of changes. So,
what sort of changes?
Well, the scope is still being discussed. The legally binding issue, well, some are of the view that we'll have to make that decision when everything is done and say whether it's legally binding or not. So, you see, listening to the negotiations, listening to the arguments of the other ASEAN member states can also play a big role in the evolving discussion.
Why would a larger power who has been able to do as it pleases in the past voluntarily curb the scope of its actions with a code of conduct if there is nothing to gain from it? The Philippines or ASEAN will have to offer something in exchange for China to say, yes, I will circumscribe my actions under a code of conduct. Final question.
I can only surmise that through these years, decades of negotiations, I don't think that they will just throw it out of the window and do whatever they want to do. They have already given some commitments through that long process. And bilaterally, ASEAN, even us, has been discussing this with them. They have a bigger role to play, not only in Southeast Asia, but of course globally. So we'll see. Actually, that question can be best asked to our Chinese friends. But I think it will not be something that can be dismissed. Eventually, I still think that the discussions are of important value.
Well, you can catch the full interview with the Philippine Foreign Minister on Asia tonight at 8 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time, right here on CNA. In other news, Hong Kong has issued its number 3 tropical storm warning as Fengshan edges closer. It replaces the strong monsoon signal that's currently in force. While it will not directly impact the city, strong winds and rain are forecast to persist in the region till Thursday, with a risk of flooding over some low-lying coastal areas. Well, the storm is tracking a path west towards the coast of Vietnam, which is also bracing for heavy rains and windy weather. A tropical storm entered the East Sea yesterday afternoon, and it is expected to further strengthen to a typhoon, with heavy rain set to lash central Vietnam from Thursday to Sunday. Thailand also issuing a heavy rain warning on the storm. Fengshan swept through northern and central Philippines yesterday. Known locally as Ramil, it killed at least 8 people, including a family of 5 who were crushed to death in their sleep by a falling tree. More than 47,000 people in southeastern Luzon have fled their homes and moved to temporary shelters. Local government in some areas affected by the storm have suspended classes today. The storm marks the 18th cyclone to batter the Philippines this year. Coming up on East Asia tonight, security and rare earth supply on the agenda. A talk set to take place between Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and US leader Donald Trump. And return to Indonesia, where President Prabowo Subianto marks his first year in power.
Do you live on plantation land?
Tapioca plantation at Hougang.
The Ballister area was a sugar plantation.
Related to the king of the crop?
The king of Gambia and pepper. Sarah Jane looks something like this. Some people say he looks like me.
I'm the granddaughter of Tan Kaki, a European trader. Told him, why don't you try rubber, which is a new crop.
The little-known side to our history. Lost plantations. Tonight on CNA.
This week on Singapore Hour.
The Singapore Oceanarium has reopened after a 3-month transformation. Today, I'm here for one reason.
It's so mesmerizing to watch. It's almost hypnotic in a way.
Singapore's eastern end. We've seen it on postcards, but have you seen it this up close?
Did you feel a bite?
Come on, I believe. All this and more on Singapore Hour, Friday on CNA.
Jenis dadah yang saya ambil melalui vape ialah mushroom THC dengan CBD oil. Sehingga kawan saya mengatakan saya ni dah gila apa semua. Setiap kali saya jatuh, keinginan saya nak bangun tu memang tinggi.
The police had a bus in Penang. The whole container, God knows how many tons of liquid cocaine, which are going to be made into vape. Stop drugs. We need to learn to know ourselves, our triggers, our weaknesses, our strengths. We need to learn how to forgive ourselves and forgive others.
Watch Vapors of Death on demand at cna.asia.
This is for those who move, those who don't wait for things to happen. They make them happen. They don't follow maps, they draw them and build what isn't there. They don't call it instinct, they call it Tuesday.
At Standard Chartered, we're here for those who never stand still, who want trusted expertise in the world's most dynamic markets.
Now is your time.
We're in a chaotic moment.
Midnight later tonight here in Thailand, it's too little too late.
And I asked whether there's a political element to it. Nobody can exactly tell you why.
Look, things are never perfect when you're engaged in politics. Each one doing what each one wants.
So what's the United Nations doing amidst this world of supreme chaos?
Pushing for answers every night on Asia Tonight.
When you're cut off from the rest of the world,
When your life depends on the medical care provided. When danger lurks just behind the hills.
I'll get the anti-venom out.
Who can come to your aid?
Biz birinchi keldik, shiday olamdik men degan birinchi o'zimga so'rab qo'ydim.
What we do is not enough.
4 individuals have dedicated their lives to helping others. Embark on a journey with them as they attempt the impossible. Reaching the Unreached, Season 2. Starts Saturday the 1st of November on CNA.
South Korean police have issued arrest warrants for dozens of its nationals who were repatriated from Cambodia over their alleged involvement in online scams. Authorities are seeking the arrests of 58 out of 64 South Korean nationals who were flown home on Saturday for their suspected links to voice phishing, romance scams and other online fraud. One was taken into custody on arrival on a pre-issued warrant. 4 were released soon after, while a request for an arrest warrant was denied for another citizen. A public anger has been on the rise in South Korea after the death of a student who flew to Cambodia for what he thought was a high-paying job. Cambodian authorities have indicted 3 Chinese nationals for allegedly torturing the 22-year-old to death. They're also looking for 2 others who took part in the crime. A task force from Seoul flew into Phnom Penh to conduct a joint autopsy. Police say there was no organ removal or other mutilation. They plan to cremate the body and repatriate it immediately after consulting with Cambodian authorities. According to the United Nations, these scam centers took off in Southeast Asia during COVID-19. Officials estimate about 1,000 South Koreans may be among some 200,000 workers inside these sites in Cambodia, with some coerced by threats of violence. But the problem spans the region. The Myanmar military says it has raided one of the country's most notorious scam compounds after an AFP investigation exposed rapid growth in the market. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is in Washington ahead of his first summit with the US President Donald Trump and the White House today. Well, Mr. Albanese is hoping to secure an agreement with the US leader on critical minerals. A proposed rare earth strategic reserve amounting to more than $1 billion is expected to feature in discussions with Mr. Trump. Washington has been scrambling to diversify its supply of critical minerals after China imposed unprecedented export restrictions over a global supply of the rare earth supply chain. Also on Mr. Albanese's agenda, the AUKUS nuclear submarine deal worth $240 billion and believed to be aimed at countering the growing presence of Chinese forces in the Indo-Pacific. The agreement between the US, Australia and the UK was put under review in June as the White House looks to align it with Mr. Trump's America First agenda. Australian officials have expressed confidence that the deal will proceed. This is Mr. Albanese's 7th visit to the US as Prime Minister, but it will be his first face-to-face with Mr. Trump. An earlier attempt during the G7 summit held in Canada in June was aborted when the American president left early, citing developments in the Middle East. Turning our attention to Indonesia now, where President Prabowo Subianto marks 1 year in office today. His administration says it's committed to ensuring that every program and budget truly reaches its intended beneficiaries. Well, as the government moves into its 2nd year, the focus is shifting towards efficiency, accountability, and delivering measurable social outcomes. But as Saiful Bara Ismail reports, the implementation of some key programs has not gone entirely according to plan.
Students at this senior high school in South Jakarta are eager to learn something new. Today's lesson, creative writing and how to compose personal memoirs. They come from low-income families and attend a Sekolah Rakyat or People's School, a program launched by President Prabowo Subianto's administration in July to help break the cycle of intergenerational poverty. This school is housed within facilities owned by the Social Affairs Ministry. Renovations have transformed the area with classrooms, dormitories and other learning spaces, all designed to give students a more enriching educational experience. Last month, President Prabowo visited the school to meet students and see firsthand how they are progressing. The program offers a full boarding school system from elementary to senior high level, all free of charge. The government aims to build 500 such schools nationwide by 2029.
Ternyata semua anak Indonesia itu hebat gitu. Dari lingkungan manapun asal dikasih kesempatan dan diasuh dengan baik gitu, maka kesadaran itu akan tumbuh dan motivasi itu akan tumbuh. Jadi mereka sekarang sudah mulai punya mimpi, punya harapan kalau saya akan sukses gitu.
The free meal program is another of Mr. Prabowo's flagship initiatives provided mainly to school children to address malnutrition and stunting. But the program has been plagued by numerous cases of food poisoning since it began in January. Mr. Prabowo has defended the program, which has reached around 30 million beneficiaries.
Ada kekurangan, ada keracunan, ini kita benahi. Tapi dari segi statistik, dibandingkan yang sudah kita hasilkan, ternyata penyimpangan kekurangan itu adalah ternyata 0,00017. Cukup membanggakan apa yang kita hasilkan.
Mr. Prabowo's first year in office has also been tested by massive demonstrations in major cities, sparked by public anger over controversial housing allowance for parliament members and deep-rooted frustration over inequality and corruption. The protests turned violent, leaving 10 people dead, posing one of the biggest challenges yet to Mr. Prabowo's presidency.
Kalau dari kinerja Bapak Presiden ya, itu sudah sebenarnya kebijakan-kebijakannya itu sebenarnya udah bagus ya Pak ya. Cuman dijalaninnya ini menurut saya kurang, makanya banyak banget protes di mana-mana.
Tolong nih yang korupsi, terutama hukumannya lebih, jangan cuma omon-omon aja. Jadi benar-benar yang mereka korupsi dihukum seberat-beratnya.
Following the unrest, Mr. Prabowo reshuffled his cabinet twice in 2 weeks, moves seen as efforts to ease public anger and consolidate his political base for the long term. Observers say the president has so far managed to maintain stability within his broad coalition.
The size of the coalition is so big, so large, then the competing and contradicting interests are not easy to be managed, right? But somehow he can do it, both using stick and carrots, right? He did not change the pattern of patronage distribution. Any president in Indonesia, including Prabowo, believe 100% that without patronage distribution as widely as possible, the power cannot be consolidated.
The military has also played a part in consolidating Mr. Prabowo's power. In early October, Indonesia's armed forces marked their 80th anniversary with a grand show of strength, underscoring the military's increasingly visible role in civilian affairs and in Mr. Prabowo's government.
Ya tentu saja ada kekhawatiran dari masyarakat sipil ya, bahwa akan kembali seperti masa Orde Baru, dua fungsi dalam bentuk yang berbeda. Nah, di satu sisi Prabowo membutuhkan dukungan politik yang cukup kuat, dan militer meskipun setelah masa reformasi dia mengalami perubahan peran politik, tetapi dia tetap aktor yang menentukan.
A defining feature of Mr. Prabowo's first year has also been his foray onto the diplomatic stage.
We must have an independent Palestine, but we must also recognize, we must also respect, and we must also guarantee the safety and security of Israel. Only then we can have real peace and no longer hate and no longer suspicion.
As President Prabowo Subianto enters his second year, he faces the challenge of restoring public confidence after a turbulent first year. His ability to turn ambitious promises into lasting progress will define not just his presidency, but his legacy. Saifullah Ismail, CNA, Jakarta.
Well, we spoke with Siwage Dharma Negara from the ISIS Yusof Ishak Institute earlier about President Prabowo's declining public popularity.
Approval rating of the president has been declining, as we know that the expectation of the people to the president is very high, and his ambitious campaign promise that Indonesia will grow much higher and more jobs will be created for the people, and also corruption will be eradicated. All these ambitious promises like now being tested, and we see that the result of the survey actually a reflection of the public's dissatisfaction about the achievement of the government. Having said that, I believe that all the promises that the president made is actually a long-term goals. Yeah, it's not easy to achieve those targets within just 1 year. So the president needs to basically improve all the institution, the governance, transparency, and the capacity of the institution, improve the coordination within the cabinet members, and that's not easy. So 1 year, I think we need to be fair to the president and the administration that this time is consolidation time for the administration to really push for their flagship programs.
And that wraps up this Monday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia and look us up on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for watching.